I left for exactly 8 weeks. 8 weeks. That's all it took. I packed up my truck, headed north for a utility contract, and left behind 5 acres of raw, honest dirt in Blackwood Ridge, Tennessee. It wasn't much to look at, just scrub oak, limestone, and a view that could break your heart, but it was mine. Paid for in cash, surveyed by my own 2 hands, and destined to be the place where I finally found some quiet. When I came back, the dirt was gone. In its place sat a 4,000-square-foot, modern farmhouse monstrosity with black-framed windows, a heated infinity pool, and a Tesla parked in a driveway that was paved better than the county highway. And the woman standing on the front porch, the president of the neighboring HOA, told me I was trespassing. She told me to leave. That was her first mistake. Her second mistake was building her dream home on land owned by a man who has spent 30 years as a forensic land surveyor. She thought she was stealing from a ghost, an absentee owner who would roll over and die. Instead, she built $1 million mansion for a man who knows exactly where the lines are drawn. And I didn't just get my land back. I took the house, too. Let me back up a bit, because to understand the sheer level of satisfaction I felt watching the sheriff escort her off my property, you have to understand where I was when this started. My name is Caleb Vance. 2 years ago, I was 58 years old, freshly divorced, and feeling like I'd been stripped down to the studs. You know how it is when life pulls the rug out. You don't want noise. You don't want complications. You just want a place to stand where the ground doesn't shake. I found that ground at a tax deed auction. Parcel 404. 5 acres of nothing, bordering the fancy side of town, but just outside the city limits. It had no utilities, no address, and no road access except for a deer trail. But I saw the potential. I'm a surveyor. I look at a tangle of briars, and I see the topography underneath. I spent the first week after I bought it just walking the lines. I found the old iron pins from the 1950s, buried under layers of leaf litter. I drove new rebar. I flagged the corners. I mapped every inch of that dirt until I knew it better than the back of my hand. I had a plan. I was going to build a small, earth-sheltered cabin, maybe 600 square feet. Solar panels, a well, a wood stove. Simple, quiet, a place to heal. Then the job in Kentucky came up. It was a big contract, mapping underground gas lines for a utility company. The money was too good to pass up, and I figured the land wasn't going anywhere. Land is patient, right? It waits. Or so I thought. It was a Tuesday night in a Motel 6 outside of Lexington when my phone buzzed. It was my buddy Buster. Buster is one of those guys who has more toys than sense. He'd just bought a high-end drone with a camera that could spot a dime from 1,000 feet. The text message just said, Caleb, did you win the lottery and not tell me?" Attached was a video file. I opened it, expecting to see him crashing his drone into a tree. Instead, the footage swept over the ridge line of Blackwood. It panned down into the valley, over the creek, and hovered over my property. I dropped my coffee. There, sitting smack in the center of my land, right where I had flagged the spot for my humble cabin, was a fortress. It was massive. White siding, black trim, a 3-car garage, and landscaping that looked like it had been installed by a team of surgeons. I watched the video 3 times, my brain refusing to process the information. Wrong coordinates, I told myself. Buster is flying over the wrong lot. But then, the drone dipped lower, and I saw it. In the corner of the frame, near a cluster of azaleas that had definitely not been there 2 months ago, was a flash of orange. It was my survey flagging. The ribbon I had tied to a hickory tree. The house was on my land. I didn't sleep that night. I packed my bag, threw my gear in the truck, and drove 6 hours straight, fueled by gas station coffee and a cold, hard rage that settled in my gut like a stone. I arrived just as the sun was coming up. The morning mist was burning off the hills, and usually, this is the time of day I love most. But today, it just illuminated the crime scene. Where my dirt path used to be, there was now a wrought iron gate. A keypad blinked red. A sign, tasteful and expensive, read, "The Estates at River Bend, Phase 4, Private Property." Phase 4. The Estates at River Bend was the gated community next door. They were a mile away. Or they were supposed to be. I got out of my truck. The air smelled of fresh mulch and money. I walked up to the gate, and before I could even try the code I didn't have, the gate buzzed. A black Range Rover rolled down the paver driveway, stopping just on the other side of the bars. The window slid down. The woman driving was exactly who you picture when you hear the words HOA president. Her hair was a helmet of blonde ambition. Her sunglasses cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and she looked at me like I was a smudge on her windshield. This was Elena Sterling. I knew of her. Everyone in the county knew of her. She was the kind of woman who sued the local high school because the marching band practice was orally intrusive. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was sweet, like tea that's been steeped too long and turned bitter. "Yeah," I said, resting my hand on the gate. "You can open this. I need to get to my land." She tilted her head. "I think you're confused, sir. This is the estates at Riverbend. This is private property. Are you a contractor? We don't allow work before 8 a.m. "I'm not a contractor, Elena," I said. "My name is Caleb Vance. I own parcel 404, the dirt you're currently idling your luxury SUV on." She didn't flinch. She didn't look surprised. She just smiled a tight, practiced smile. "Oh, you must be the previous owner. We were told you were unavailable." Unavailable. I laughed, a dry, barking sound. I was in Kentucky, not Mars. "And what do you mean previous?" "The parcel was annexed," she said, as casually as if she were talking about the weather. "It was an abandoned lot, creating a blight on our viewshed. The HOA exercised a clause to absorb non-maintained adjacent properties for community improvement. It's all filed with the county. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a Pilates class." She hit a button on her visor. The gate clicked, but she didn't open it for me. She waited for me to step back so she could leave. "You built a house on it," I said, not moving. "That's not community improvement. That's a private residence." "It's the model home for Phase 4, she corrected. "And my temporary residence while my main house is being renovated. It's all perfectly legal. Now move, or I call the sheriff." "Call him," I said. "Please. I'd love to chat with him." She glared at me, then reversed the car, spun around, and drove back up the driveway to the mansion. I stood there for a minute, shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of pure, unadulterated disbelief. She had stolen my land, built a palace on it, and was now living in it like she was Marie Antoinette. I got back in my truck. I didn't go to the sheriff. Not yet. Cops need proof. I needed to go to the source. I drove straight to the county courthouse. The clerk of court, a woman named Martha who has been there since the Reagan administration, looked up when I stormed in. "Caleb," she said, "you look like you swallowed a beehive." "I need to see the deed for parcel 404, I said. "And I need to see any transfer documents filed in the last 8 weeks. Martha pulled the file. She laid it on the counter. "Here it is. Filed 6 weeks ago. Quitclaim deed. Transfer of ownership from Caleb Vance to River Bend Development Group, LLC. I stared at the paper. There was a signature at the bottom. It said Caleb Vance. It looked nothing like my signature. It looked like someone had practiced it once and given up. But then I looked at the notary stamp. Silas Reed. Commission expires 2026. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Martha," I whispered, "look at the notary." She squinted. "Silas Reed? Caleb. Silas died last year. I went to his funeral. It rained." "Exactly," I said. "Dead men don't notarize deeds." We stood there in silence, the hum of the fluorescent lights sounding like a roar in my ears. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. This was felony fraud. Forgery. Theft. "Who filed this?" I asked. "It came in via courier," Martha said, tapping the keyboard. "From the office of Sterling Horizons." "Elena Sterling," I said. "And," Martha added, digging deeper into the digital file, "there's a zoning variance attached. Signed off by the planning commissioner, Julian Sterling. Her son." The picture was coming into focus. Elena wanted the land for her Phase 4. She knew I was out of town. She forged a deed, used a dead notary's stolen stamp, probably bought off an estate sale or stolen from an old office, and had her son push the zoning through. They built the house at breakneck speed, probably using prefab sections to get it up that fast, intending to flip it or claim squatters' rights, or bury me in legal fees until I gave up. "Can I make copies?" I asked. "Honey," Martha said, handing me the file. "Make copies, take pictures, and call a lawyer who eats nails for breakfast." I spent the next 3 days living out of my truck, but I wasn't idle. I was doing what I do best. I was surveying the situation. I set up trail cameras in the woods surrounding the property, my woods. I captured everything. The landscaping trucks coming in with Sterling Landscaping on the side. The pool maintenance crew. And Elena, sitting on the back deck, drinking wine, hosting parties on land she stole. I pulled the permits. They were all signed by Julian. I pulled the LLC records. Sterling Horizons was registered to Elena's home address. But the real smoking gun came from the trash. I know, it sounds cliché, but criminals are lazy. I waited until trash day. I watched the sanitation truck pick up the bins from the model home. I followed the truck to the transfer station. I paid the guy $20 to let me grab the bags from that specific stop. It was gross. It was humiliating. And it was worth it. Inside a bag of coffee grounds and expensive wine bottles, I found a shredded document. It took me 6 hours and a roll of Scotch tape to put it back together in my motel room. It was an email printout. From Elena to Julian. He's gone for 2 months. We need to get the foundation poured by Friday. Use the Silas stamp. Nobody checks the notary registry for small parcels. Once the structure is up, he can't make us tear it down. We'll settle out of court for pennies. Just get it done. Once the structure is up, he can't make us tear it down. She was banking on the legal principle of unjust enrichment or waste. She thought a judge would look at $1 million house and force me to sell the land to her rather than destroy the asset. She thought she was playing 4D chess. She didn't realize I was playing by different rules. I called a lawyer friend of mine, a guy named Marcus who specializes in property disputes and hates HOAs with a passion usually reserved for sports rivalries. I showed him the forged deed, the dead notary's obituary, the shredded email, and the video of Elena admitting it was a model home. Marcus looked at the pile of evidence, took a sip of bourbon, and smiled. "Caleb," he said, "do you know what happens when someone builds a permanent structure on land they don't own, using fraudulent means to do it? They have to tear it down?" I guessed. "Usually," Marcus said. "But in cases of bad faith, and this is the definition of bad faith, the court can rule that the structure becomes a fixture of the land. It becomes part of the property." He leaned forward. "She didn't just build a house, Caleb. She gave you a house. We filed the suit the next morning. But we didn't just file a civil suit. We went to the district attorney. Sheriff Miller is a good man, but he's slow. The DA, however, is young, ambitious, and up for re-election. When I laid out the forgery of a public record, using a dead man's seal, his eyes lit up like Christmas trees. "We move now," the DA said. "This is a criminal conspiracy." But I asked them to wait, just for 24 hours, because I had seen something on Zillow. Elena had listed the house. Luxury estate. Private gated access. $1.2 million. Open house this Sunday. She was trying to flip it before I could catch her. She was trying to cash out the equity and run. "Let her have the open house," I told the DA. "Let her catch herself." Sunday came. I parked my truck down the road and hiked through the woods, coming up the back way, past the creek. I stood in the tree line, watching. Cars were lined up. Mercedes, BMWs. Prospective buyers were walking around the grounds, admiring the infinity pool, touching the stone facade. Elena was there, holding cord in the foyer, handing out brochures, laughing that fake laugh. I walked out of the woods. I was wearing my muddy work boots, my surveyor's vest, and a baseball cap. I walked right through the back gate, past the pool, and slid open the massive glass patio doors. The chatter in the living room died down. 20 people turned to look at the dirty man in the vest entering the pristine mansion. Elena dropped her stack of brochures. Her face went the color of skim milk. "Excuse me," she stammered, trying to regain control. "This is a private showing. You need to leave." "I don't think I do," I said, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "Folks, I hate to ruin your Sunday afternoon, but you should probably know something before you put down a deposit." I reached into my vest and pulled out the deed. The real one. "My name is Caleb Vance. This is my land. This woman." I pointed at Elena, whose hand was shaking so bad her wine glass was vibrating. "Forged a deed using a notary who has been dead for a year. She built this house illegally. And as of this morning, there is a lien on this property and a criminal warrant for her arrest." The silence was absolute. You could hear the ice melting in the punch bowl. "That's a lie," Elena shrieked. "He's a squatter. He's crazy. Julian, call the police." "You don't need to call them," I said, calm as a frozen lake. "I brought them with me." On cue, 3 sheriff's cruisers rolled up the long, paved driveway, lights flashing but sirens off. Sheriff Miller stepped out, followed by 2 deputies. Elena tried to run. I'm not kidding. She actually tried to bolt for the back door, past me. But she tripped over her own heels on the marble floor and went down hard. Sheriff Miller walked in. Elena Sterling. Julian Sterling. You are under arrest for forgery, fraud, and grand larceny. They cuffed her right there in the living room, in front of the potential buyers, in front of her neighbors. Julian was found hiding in the pantry, crying. The buyers scattered like roaches when the lights turn on. Within 5 minutes, the house was empty, except for me, the cops, and the silence. The legal battle took 6 months, but it was a slaughter. The evidence was overwhelming. The bad faith was undeniable. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Patterson, looked at Elena during the final hearing. Elena was wearing an orange jumpsuit now, her roots showing, her arrogance stripped away. Ms. Sterling, the judge said, you attempted to steal a man's livelihood through arrogance and deceit. You assumed he was too poor or too stupid to fight back. You were wrong. The ruling was historic. Because the house was built on a permanent foundation on my land, and because it was built during the commission of a felony, the judge ruled that I had no obligation to compensate Sterling Horizons for the cost of construction. The house was a fixture. It belonged to the land. It belonged to me. I walked out of that courthouse with the keys to a $1.2 million mansion that I hadn't paid a dime for. The first night I spent in the house, it felt weird. It was too big, too echoey. It smelled like new car and pretension. I sat in the living room on a folding camping chair because I didn't have any furniture yet, eating a pizza out of the box, looking at the fireplace that cost more than my truck. I thought about selling it. I really did. I could have cashed out, taken the million, and moved to Fiji. But then I thought about Elena. I thought about how she looked at me at the gate. This is phase 4. No, this wasn't phase 4. This was my home. So I kept it. But I made some changes. I turned the 3-car garage into a workshop for my surveying equipment. I tore out the pristine, water-guzzling lawn and planted a massive vegetable garden right in the front yard. Tomatoes, corn, squash, a real chaotic mess of green. And the gate? I kept the gate. But I changed the sign. I took down the estates at Riverbend plaque. I welded a new one myself. It's made of scrap metal, rough and jagged. It says, The Vance Homestead. Built by Karens. Owned by Caleb. Trespassers will be used as fertilizer. The neighbors from the HOA hate it. They have to drive past my house every day to get to their section. They have to look at my unkempt garden and my truck parked on the pavers. They have to know that their queen bee is sitting in a cell in the state penitentiary, doing 3 to 5 for fraud. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on the back deck, drinking my coffee and looking at the infinity pool I didn't pay for, I wave at them. They never wave back. It's been a year now. I've filled the house with secondhand furniture, rugs I like, and books. It's starting to feel less like a museum and more like a home. The echoes are gone. I learned something important out of all this. People like Elena, they think the world is theirs for the taking. They think boundaries are just suggestions for other people. They think money makes them bulletproof. But land is honest. It doesn't care about your bank account. It doesn't care about your social status. It only cares about who holds the ground. I held the ground. And thanks to Elena, I got a hell of a free upgrade. So, I have to ask you folks, have you ever had a neighbor who thought the rules didn't apply to them? What would you do if you came home and found a mansion on your property? Would you sell it, or would you live in it just to spite them? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're ever in Blackwood Ridge, drive by. You can't miss the place. It's the mansion with the scarecrow in the front yard wearing a Chanel blazer. Thanks for listening. Stay within your lines, folks.